Hey, good morning. And Tim, thank you for this highly coveted just before lunch session. This is like awesome. I want to welcome you all to this session. It's about 45 minutes. We've got a lot to cover. We've got an amazing amount of seasoned people here in the room. First, second, third startups and ventures I've seen. Successful ones, frustrating ones, the whole gamut. First of all, I want to really tell you it's an honor for me to be here presenting to you. I'm a civilian, but presenting to you, all the military veterans here in the room, just really an honor for me. So thank you for that, and thank you for your service to our country. What you'll see going around is a one-page handout. You know, later down the road, if you want a copy of the slides, you're welcome. We'll be happy to email those to you. This is just kind of to get the first couple slides out of the way. We want to be practical here, not theoretical. Okay, 10% theoretical, 90% practical. That's my promise. And what you see on the screen right here is basically just the opening that says, this Cross the Chasm 3.0. Some of you were in elementary school or not born yet when the first Chasm book came out, more than 25 years ago. We've updated it 3 times now. That's the one you have in front of you here. So these founders are making life difficult for us. They keep creating great new companies. We got to put those new examples in the book. So there you have it. So we won't have time for Q&A at the end because there's lunchtime, but I'll be around here or in the lunch area to answer any questions if you have any. First, a few questions of this group before we start. And not how many are commissioned officers, not that question. One is, how many of you are involved currently or plan to be in a tech product or a tech service startup with the emphasis on tech? Okay, wow, okay, all right. How about not tech, but other products, other services? That's okay too. All right, great, okay. So we got about 90%, 10%, cool, all right. Other question is, how about B2B as the primary audience for you? Show of hands on that, okay. And then how about B2C? I won't ask about, I don't know. We won't ask that question right now. And then how about government as your main target customer? Raise of hands on that, okay. How about private sector as the main target? And there's a blend. You've got a hybrid as well on that, so good. Okay, you all passed the test. Very good, all right. So as we move forward, a couple things to think about. You've got dozens or hundreds of questions. You heard it from the panel. This panel of 7 people, by the way, really a smart, august group of people. I'm really glad you had that setting up before me. Really good group. And a few things that Mike said, Sherman said, and a few others, we're going to bring those back into the discussion here. But as you think about the work, there's actually 3 questions that you'll see at the bottom of that one-page handout, if you have it in front of you there somewhere. Those 3 questions, you've got dozens or hundreds of questions on funding, on the pitch for the VC, on the updates, on everything about go-to-market. But if you don't get these 3 questions answered, then I hope luck is a major part of your strategy, which I don't recommend, by the way. I recommend 10.5% luck, 89.5% destiny about what we're doing. That's really the goal. And so these 3 questions, and they seem like simple ones, but they're not. You know, the first one, as you think about it, let me just get back to there, is the bubbles. It says, hey, it's more than one market. Even if you're selling into the government, into federal, there's DOD, there's Homeland Security, and by the way, even within there's departments and use cases and applications, a whole host of different things going on. So the first question is, how many segments are you looking at and have you explored? And if it's one, then everything I cover here is going to be frustrating for you because I don't recommend looking at one. There's at least 3 or 4, maybe 5 or 10. You'll see the numbers there. The second question is, okay, which one are we going to put the wood behind the arrow on? And you heard this from Sherman a little while ago during the discussion up here, which is, can you dominate, this is my terms, I'm paraphrasing, can you dominate some application segment before you try to solve world hunger? We see lots of people, not in this room, of course, but in other venture groups who try to solve too many problems at one time. So the question is really, what's your mission in the first segment to go after? And by the way, we're going to define segment because it's a waste case of a word. It's many, many different misuses of the term. And then the third one is, once you've figured out how to get the chasm crossing target, that's only the second step. The third is, how do you operationalize it? How do you execute? And you'll see in very small font there, sorry about that, you'll see a larger font on a slide coming up, there's 9 key success factors. And we've worked with 225 tech companies in services, in cloud, in storage, in SaaS, in a host of different companies and industries. And the unifying factor is that these 9 if you follow these poorly, these 9, starting with, did you pick the right segment? Do you have a compelling reason to buy? Not about for you, but we call that compelling reason to sell. Nobody gives a shit about that. Compelling reason to buy is, why would the customer take money out of their pocket and buy a subscription, buy your solution, et cetera? And then whole product, which you'll see in a few minutes as well. Those 9 are the 9 fatal flaws if we don't get them right. They're the 9 success factors if we get them right. And so you're going to see we're going to dig deeper into that. My work, and sometimes people ask me, don't you get bored after 20 years of doing this? I get excited every day about the ventures, the startups, the scale-ups. And you'll see both emerging and kind of other kinds of companies that are out there as well, the larger ones on the page. And I had the liberty and the privilege of working with Salesforce in the early days, with Spotify in the early days, with a whole host of companies who actually, yeah, believe it or not, didn't just take the book and put it under their pillow. Mark Benioff actually utilized it, which is cool. And so what you're going to see, nobody does it perfectly, but the goal is, how do we get it right? And so you're not on the right-hand side. We work with large companies who do breakthrough investments in a whole host of different things. You're on the left-hand side. You're emerging or pre-emerging, no offense. And what you're going to see in the pattern here in the next 42 minutes is the following, is that there's a sequence of, I'll call it engineering your marketplace. How do you cross this chasm? It's a buzzword, but now that we've had the book out to a few million people, the buzzword should mean something, and it means this. It means, can you dominate by getting 40% or more of the target segment? You don't need 51%. Can you get 40% or more of the target segment and dominate them, but not the early adopters? Pragmatist, normal customers, not the early mission adopters. And by the way, the 40% says, and the second part of that is, can you be twice the size of the nearest competitor in the segment? That's what Salesforce did. That's what a whole host of companies done that we work with. And so it's not a 51%. By the way, I've heard from people go, we are the market leader in our market. We've got 19%. Those other losers have 16%. That doesn't give you any leverage in the marketplace at all. That's not power. That's just statistical information. So those 3 questions are actually drivers to helping companies like yourselves in the marketplace. Whether you're in the first round, second round, further round, you'll hear from Bruce Cleveland later on about the whole set of issues around traction gap. The third piece we should mention, and this is really a fundamental, is I got a promise for you. I wish I could say, being here today and tomorrow, that you'll all be perfect in what you do. No. What I promise you is this. If you follow the methods, take the book, read it, apply it, get our help, do it on your own, whatever, you can look at the odds. It's a rather pathetic number. It's basically 17% success rates of new ventures with their new products. That's 1 out of 6. And that's even being fairly liberal on the definition of success. We don't get it to 100% with our Chasm work. We get it to about, we think, 75, about a 4x. Not because of anything clever we're doing. It puts a systematic approach in for the clients, for the companies, and so forth. And so that's what that page is all about. A show of hands on something as we go forward here. I'm going to ask you what industries you're interested in most, what problems to be solved. And so what we're going to do is move to what I call our playbook. And our playbook is our actual set of content that we work with clients on. I'll share some of that with you today. So what you're seeing on this slide are the yellow boxes and also a margin down the left-hand side. And I'm hoping that many of you see yourselves in 1 or 2 or 3 of those. And what we're saying is these are what we call megatrends. Next 2 years, 3 years, and easily, in the multiple billions in terms of overall opportunity. So let me ask, anybody see themselves or their company in one of those yellow or in one of those left-hand margins? Quick show of hands if you got that. I'm kind of hoping. Okay, all right. If you don't, that's okay, but we're saying these are fundamental trends, whether it's the cybersecurity one, whether it's the analytics one, whether it's AI and ML, et cetera, et cetera. And what I want you to know is you're unique in every way, and you're also not unique in every way. And by that I mean every company that we've worked with, we've studied all of these companies. We've also studied the ones that are a bit smaller or still high growth on the next page. About 2/3 of these are clients. The other third we work with, have a good relationship with, but they're not clients. And so we want to now get back to how do those companies or you, or as an investor, think about the questions. And so those questions, I've just put them in vertical order here. I think you can handle that, right? We've gone from horizontal to vertical. And that first question, if we skip that one and go, we know people in that segment, let's skip all this other stuff. No, we think you should basically rate and rank and score the segments. We've got some analytics I'm going to share with you today that you can utilize on your own as you wish. And the reason why that first one is so important on the identifying the segments, and then second one on which segment to pursue, is there's a really technical phrase. I hope you can all keep up with me. I'm kidding. That technical phrase is spray and pray. Now, that would never happen to anybody in this room, which means, can we spray our product or our SaaS solution across the full market and then pray that 20% of people somewhere adopt? That's an awful strategy for getting across the chasm. In fact, it won't work. Of the 225 companies we work with, 0 have sprayed and prayed their way across. 0 have discounted their prices heavily beyond what made sense to get across the chasm. That also doesn't work. We could spend a lot of time on that. Now, the irony is, when you're in the really early market, a little bit of spray and pray is not bad. You're testing out, proof of concept, all that stuff. But when you're trying to focus on the 40% domination somewhere, spray and pray is going to be your recipe for failure, frustration, investor disappointment, and so forth. And so as we think about this, I want to bring up one construct. It's one of the 9 points that you probably cannot read unless you see it on your sheet there. It's the third one down, whole product. Got to stop thinking about our product. You already know this. We're talking whole product, whole offer. Silicon Valley, where I'm based, or where you're based, whether it's in New Jersey or New York or Boston or Texas, there's great engineers thinking about product all the time. I don't worry about your product. I have sleepless nights about your whole product. If those were the only 8 wedges on the slide, there's probably 20 or 30. These are just a few samples. And it turns out that you'll see a term in the lower left. It's called MVWP, Minimum Viable Whole Product. It's a little different than minimum viable product, and it says, oh my God, here comes a consultant trying to refine things down to how many angels on the head of a pin. But minimum viable product in the early market is, will the product work at all? Will it explode upon impact? That's early market. I'm being a bit facetious. Minimum viable whole price is for the pragmatist in the bowling alley, the normal customer, not the early adopter. Do you have everything they need and nothing they don't need? Just came out of a meeting yesterday with a SaaS company here in the Bay Area who said, we've been having trouble crossing the chasm, so we keep adding more features into the product because we know that'll help. I see some of you sickly, putting your head. That's the antithesis of, it may be about subtraction and reducing complexity than it is about addition. Here's the problem. Your R&D teams, who are great, go, I didn't go to grad school in photonics so I could reduce and simplify the product. I want to add stuff in. They don't use the word stuff, but you get the idea. And it turns out that later it's great to do what we call plus ones when you've already established yourself. Those are nice incremental improvements. But in chasm crossing, it's minimum viable. And you'll see examples of that with some of the companies we work with that I'll bring up in a few minutes. And as you think about that, let's define something for a moment here, which is really, what the hell is a segment? I went to Harvard Business School many years ago. We spent 2.5 months on segments and segmentation. I want to save you a little time and give you a paragraph. So if you could take 15 seconds and read this through, it distinguishes between market, between segment, and between the attack on a segment. Just take 15 seconds to read that through, please. As you look at that, the segment's not about you. Have you been in meetings and maybe even pitching to a VC or to somebody in an LP, and you're saying, this is how we decided to segment the marketplace? What a crazy phrase. This is like, we decided the globe looks like this, therefore we will sail this way in a northwestern direction. It's like, the segments already exist, you gotta go find them. This is not about you designing the segments. It's, would a customer look at those segments and say, I'm in one of those, or I'm in none of those, or I'm in 3 of those. And if the segments are about you and your product, then surrender now. That's the first piece. Market is this amoeba-shaped like thing that has lots of segments in it, and people go, how hard is this anyway? I can skip reading a book by just focusing on the biggest, hairiest, mother of all segments. Try that. No, don't try that. You'll never get the traction in most cases because the pain points are too dispersed, too heterogeneous. And then you'll see in the idea about marketing, it's not about convincing people, it's about making an offer that really makes sense for the people in pain, whether in medtech, in AI, in ML, in cyber, in whatever it might be. And as you think about these definitions, the segment one, go back tomorrow, or maybe this afternoon, and say, are the segments that we're, and I hope you're thinking about segments and not broad. Here's the TAM. Hey, TAM is great. TAM does not get you across the chasm. TAM is the total addressable market. We're talking about the segments within those markets. Does that make sense? Show the investor TAM and say if we can really win in the bowling alley, we explode out through tornado into TAM, but that ain't the starting point. That's like saying to a third grader, you know, those SAT tests are pretty tough. It's like, try maybe the Iowa test first. How's that? Or whatever they do in third grade these days. I haven't kept up. So you're seeing these slides are pretty busy because we have, this is from the playbook itself. And the first thing we haven't talked about that we need to bring up at this point is this word that's a disease in Silicon Valley, it's a disease in Boston and other places, and it's the word disruptive. Have you heard it this morning over coffee? That we're disrupting this market? Nothing wrong with that. We have a very specific definition of disruptive at Chasm. It's not, I had kind of a bad breakfast this morning and I'm yet again, my stomach is disruptive. Where's the Rolaids? That's not the disruptive. It's not my father-in-law in the last holidays was once again disruptive. That's not what we're talking about. We have three specific discussion points around your product, your solution. The first one is it a disruptive innovation? Does it change the behavior? Does it require a change in the behavior of the customer? You'll see this in the book. Does it require a change in the behavior of the customer? That's not so hard. Yes, it is. For those of you getting in the elevator here this morning and realizing the buttons are on the inside and going, what the hell? I like to control where I go. That's a slight change in behavior. You're asking for a lot more from some of your customers. So one is there a change in behavior required? Two, is there a change in skill required? The way they actually do their job, use your tools, use your methods. And third, is there a change in process or workflow, depending on the word you use in your industry? Change in behavior, change in skill, change in workflow or process. And by the way, if the answer is no, 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 then there's two possible outcomes. One is you don't need to cross the chasm. You might be late, 10 years late, because somebody else already has something on Main Street, but you don't have to cross. Or two, we're being delusional that we think, well, man, this baby I've been building the last 3 years, I'm so comfortable with it, it must be non-disruptive. Beware, you're not the test case for this. And the early market's not the test case. That's only 5 to 7% of the market. I'm talking about the bowling alley that we'll talk about in just a few minutes. And so as you think about that, there's a map or a construct, and I'll fill in the blank at the bottom just speaking to it because the slides aren't behaving the way I'd like them to, is it depends on what tech market stage you're in. Segmentation in the early market is too early. Go out and test it with med companies, lumber companies, healthcare companies, rental car companies. Try it with many to basically cull it down to the right number. But when you're crossing the chasm, getting across that crevasse into the main marketplace, that's where it matters. And by the way, the chasm was around before the book was written, okay? It's caused hiccups and problems for innovators and VCs and founders for 100 years, maybe more. The question is, how do you accelerate from the early stage to the tremendous opportunity in the bowling alley with pragmatists? And by the way, pragmatists, they're never going to say to you, wow, that's really cool. They're 30% of the market. They're going to say, does that solve my problem? Or does it cause bigger problems by deploying it than you're currently solving for me at this moment? That's a bad trade-off. That's why a whole product has to be simplified. And so as you think about this, and why the book was written originally and the updates, is to give you a set of, we'll call it constructs to think about. You'll see you're doing some of those things already. Awesome. You might not have thought about a few things. Great. Let's consider using those. And so this, what we call the tech market model, is an update to what you've seen in previous books. And the reason we did this was there were too many CEOs, when you show the technology adoption life cycle that basically goes down and to the right, they end up concluding, well, we're done with that market. You know, we had tornado, therefore, let's go find some other cool stuff to do. No. What a great place Main Street is for harvesting for the next 10 or 20 years and paying and funding the new stuff you're trying to do. So you'll see in a minute what that all means. But each one of those is actually part of the curve that says you are somewhere on there right now with your market. If it's Tesla, they used to be in early market, used to be in chasm crossing. You could argue they're in probably late bowling alley now within segments. In China, exploding more than North America. In South Dakota, not quite in the same place as it might be in the Bay Area or Boston or somewhere else like Atlanta. And what you're going to see is the horizontal axis. That's the timeline and also the willingness of customers to take risk. By greater risk, left-hand side, obviously, less risk on the right. Don't mess with me. Come back next year. And so what we're going to see is this construct will give you guidance on some stuff that you're grappling with today, like, is it a go or no-go? Do we have the right support structure in place? What about our pricing? Is our field properly trained? Did we hire lots of sales reps? God, I hope not. We're going to see in chasm crossing that 1/6 of the successful sales reps in this country can actually do what we call consultative selling in the bowling alley. 1/6. So if you hire somebody from a big company, from a Dell or IBM, and man, they made their numbers the last 5 years, they've been selling stuff in transactional on Main Street, and you hire them in, and you're thinking they're going to help you cross the chasm, unless you have a magic potion, that's not going to work. So what we're going to see here is this set of litmus tests around what this really is. You don't have to read anything but except for what's in the yellow-green box, whatever the color is in front of your screen. It's different than on mine. The real question is, Tesla may be in bowling alley. Where are the normal internal combustion diesel Main Street, 5B, 5C, kind of late market, but still around for the next 20, 30, possibly more years? And what we're going to see is your disrupting of that is your job. But it's not to make a command decision. It's to identify where in the marketplace you can actually move ahead. And so I'm going to throw something at you here. This is the other slide I'd like you to take just 15 seconds to pursue. Is each one of these stages has meaning to it. We're only going to focus on the first 3, but have a quick scan on that with your eyes. Just take a look at that for 15 seconds. What's the easiest stage on here? What we call 1A, early market. Used to be hard. Used to be how to build a company, a Salesforce, piece of hardware. That was 20 years ago. Now it's easier than ever to get into 1A. It's really hard to get to 1B and 1C, meaning move along. And what you're going to notice is that the early enthusiasts are as excited about your product as you are. That's your parents, maybe a brother or sister, and some of your early adopter customers. The rest of them are not impressed yet. You're not solving their problem yet. You've got a proof of concept. You've got maybe minimum whole product, but not minimum viable whole product for the entire pragmatist group. And notice the lower left. I know it's a small font, but the phrasing on here, I just changed it and updated it. It says disparate pilot projects yielding weak traction. It could also be desperate, but it's not. We're talking disparate. We're winning in different industries, we're getting a few deals, but no cohesion around a dominant position anywhere. How do we fix that? Well, it turns out that the next 3 slides are basically a walkthrough. You'll see it in the book, but I want to just give you a chance to see that early market is about 3 to 7% of the overall market. It would be a larger number, but many early market visionaries got punished for adopting too early, and they've migrated to the right, or they've migrated, call it eastward on this graph. So it's 3 to 7% is in the early market. These are pilot projects, betas, early test cases, all the cool things that we need to be doing. And if you're in the really early left-hand tip of that, don't think about crossing the chasm. It's too early. Truly, if you have change in behavior, skill, and process or workflow, all 3 of those. Early market is the easiest one to get into and the toughest one to get out of. How's that? This is basically a look at, and you saw the paragraph below, that says, fundamentally, that's the description. I'm not going to read it to you. What's the next one? Chasm. You might think, oh man, don't tell the funders or my parents or the CEO that we're in chasm. Wrong. Chasm is a sign of progress. It means we're done with the freaking early market, and now it's time to commercialize the product, productize it in the main marketplace. So actually, chasm is a sign of progress. People don't think of it that way. They think, oh man, the valley of death, those are all kind of incorrect depictions of that. It basically means, hey, we're done with the early stage. Now it's time to make some money and really build a business of dominance in the pragmatist realm. Is that possibly misunderstood by people? Oh, no, we're in the chasm. It's okay. Now, it's good to be in the chasm. It's not good to be stuck in the chasm. The chasm is defined as what? It's when you have a product, but the majority of pragmatic customers on the right-hand side are delaying adoption. They don't believe that your product is safe enough, robust enough, all those things. Turns out that chasms can last anywhere from 6 months, you don't want to hear the next part, to forever. Okay, infinity is a long time. So chasm's not bad. Chasm's like 6th grade. It's okay to be there for a while, but if it's your 3rd year of 6th grade, not so good. And so what we need to do is identify the points, and you'll see them in the book, about the signals that tell you that you should be done with the early market and that you're crossing the chasm. Oh, another tip that's really important to this slide is don't get bummed when another competitor comes out with a like product. You're not going to cross the chasm if you're the only player in that piece, in that segment, in that area. The ideal case in chasm crossing is a weak reference competitor. Because pragmatists, if you're the only one, they go, oh my God, are we going to be lemmings again, you know, going off the cliff because we're taking the hot solution from one vendor? No, this is why we're better than vendor number 2. In fact, one of our clients, they didn't have a competitor, so they licensed their SaaS technology for healthcare, to another competitor who they knew was going to screw it up. So when customers, who else does this? You can say, well, company Y does this too, but here's why it's really not that good. They go, oh, you're better. Okay. That's how pragmatists think. And when you think about this chasm and segueing into what we call bowling alley, I admit it, bowling is not a cool sport. You know, lawn darts or rock climbing or parachuting, which many of you have done, much cooler. But bowling is about physics. It's about, can you hit the head pin in a manner that creates pin action? Now, whether you're a good bowler or not, you know, you hit one at the side, you know, the pin at the very, it's not going to help. Hit the head pin to create that momentum. And you're going to see most companies that we work with, probably 90%, got it right the first or second time. Some struggled with a 3rd and 4th, but the redos are expensive. Those are called pivots in many cases. And so you're going to see bowling alley. What's the phrase at the bottom? This is like the warning on the side of the cigarette pack. Broad sales motions will fail. This is the exact time not to spray and pray. This is about going after a segment, having confidence that you did. You'll see the scoring we do in a few minutes to do that. And so when we think about the terms and how we actually move through this, a couple things to mention. One is, I want to reemphasize what a segment is. It's not who you choose. It's not what you think. It's not how you configure it. It's that paragraph there. It's either customers or prospects who share the same problem with each other in a space. In B2B, it might be in a certain marketplace, like in cybersecurity or in retail or in whatever it might be. But that's not enough. The second part is, and they talk with each other before making buying decisions. You go, my customers talk with each other? Yeah, of course they do. And what you heard from Sherman in the panel this morning about, you know, a great question about, hey, what kind of run rate do we need to be taken seriously around here? Well, show dominance in the bowling alley in a segment, and then show where that's going to lead in the future. If the only thing you can do is conquer that one pin, that one segment, then it's got to be an awful big segment to make it worthwhile. Show the pin action that can occur in 12 months, 18 months, beyond that. By the way, the segments can be geographies, they can be use cases, they can be different departments in DoD. There's a whole host of different ways to think about that. And so the question that I have in front of you is, it's February right now, barely, but we're in February. If you were going to take the segments, and I'll just back up for a page here, a slide. If you're going to take the segments you're looking at and basically ask yourselves, where on this tech market model are those segments today? Are some too early to actually accelerate with? Are some too late? This is a mapping function that we do with our clients. You can do some of that on your own with a book or with a little bit of assistance from us, whatever you want. But the idea is this, is if all the segments you have, if none of them are really chasm ready to cross, with a real pain point, a real problem in the bowling alley, then you're not going to cross. You can spend money, you can double your sales force, all those things that aren't going to help. And so the question I'm going to leave you with on this first part of this session is the where question, which is, where are the segments that we're going after today? By the way, when Spotify went into the US market, they didn't go, man, 330 million people, that's awesome. Spotify went after the US college students. You know what? They picked 12 universities to go after. Some of the Ivies, University of Michigan, UCLA, US, they picked a whole, UT, they picked a whole host of universities, 12 of them. You might think, Spotify, seriously? And here's the problem. When you look back later, and Spotify just got their 200, I wish I could claim credit for their amazing success. We helped them a little bit. They just hit their 200 millionth paying subscriber. 200 million people paying $9.99 or a $12.99 family plan or some student discount, but you get the idea. Do the math on that for a minute. It's a decade-old company, 200 million customers paying about average of $9.99 a month. That's a pretty good flow. They've also got 350 million on the free plan with ads, but that's not where they're measuring their run rate, obviously. And they went after the US, is that discipline? US college students in 12 universities to start with. And it was East Coast, West Coast, and Texas. Not because the others weren't good, but they wanted to really build dominant position first. By the way, Uber did that. Facebook did that. Uber started in this city, I don't know if you know, as a black limo company, as a nice high-end limo company, not as a car rideshare. And they moved step by. And here's the problem. You look now at Salesforce with 28.5 billion in sales every year, or Spotify with their 200, and you go, man, they're everywhere. They didn't start there. They did not start there. They did not spray and pray. Whether it's Daniel Ek at Spotify or whether it's Mark Benioff at Salesforce. It seems to be the S companies we're talking about here. And so what I want to introduce to you on this next phase is talking about the scoring mechanism for identifying what we need to be looking at from a segment standpoint. And where this begins is the discussion that there's a rating, ranking, and basically scoring process for the segments that you go after. And size, you'll see, is not one of the 9 criteria. We'll get there, don't worry. But if size is your first criterion and not your last one, then you got all the wrong things lined up first. Like, is there really a problem? Do they have money? Do they care? Can we reach them? All those questions. Ouch, right? And so what you'll see is at the bottom of this page, and this will be another 15-minute drill, sorry about that, but these are dense slides, violate every PowerPoint rule in the world. Just skim that with your eyes for 15 seconds. That'd be great. As you see that slide, a couple things become very evident. First is that, hey, Michael, are you joking? One segment? The book says one segment. This slide says one segment to focus on. Just among friends in the room, 2 is okay. The reason we don't put 2 in the book is because too many of you are so aspirational that when we say 2, you go, well, if 2's good, we know our stuff, we're doing 4. And if 4 is good, let's go to 7. And all of a sudden, we're spraying and praying again. So it's okay to have 1 or 2 segments, not just 1. But you'll see at the bottom, every one of those companies, and we've got cases we've followed on all these. Half of them are our clients, the other half we've studied. Apple, now they're everywhere with their iPhone. When they began, laser focused. US market, 1 channel partner only, AT&T Wireless, very limited SKU. When we saw, take the extreme on the right-hand side, some of you may not even remember that when Amazon was actually a retail company only selling books. Do you know what kind of discipline that was for Amazon for 6 years to hit 1 key on the piano? Selling books only. Why the hell was it books? You ever ask that question? Well, it's a volume business, but it's also something that the normal customers could recognize as real. The Gucci bags online, are they styrofoam or Playtex or latex or whatever the hell they might be? The books are books. So they decided at Amazon this is the most certain, concrete product we can sell first in volume without any dissonance. Now they're selling lawn furniture and diamond rings and all the other stuff, right? The 10 million items. And now they're into AWS, which is a whole other story. Is that discipline for 6 years to focus on 1 application, 1 segment in the US market? Yeah. What we look at with all those companies is the discipline of deciding when to move on into other segments and also when have you dominated the one that you need to be going after in the first place. And so the scoring that I'm not going to take you through, but there's 9 variables. And if you'd like, you can in the book read a little bit more about this, but there's 9 variables. Each one gets a score of 1, 3, or 5. There's weightedness in there. Perfect score is 100. Never seen 100. If you come to me with 100 in your email, I will not believe you. There's no ideal perfect segment. But if you just want to jot it down, if the scoring here is 85 or above, in the total weightedness of those 9, then you have an 80% likelihood of getting across the chasm. The further down you go, some optimists go, hey, you know what? We scored 50. That's half of 100. We're getting there. No, you're not. You're a dead man walking at that rate. 50 says there's no problem identified. We don't have a channel. Our price is too high and not appealing enough. The ROI is too low, et cetera, et cetera. So all 9 of those, so what do those words really mean? Let me just bring it up in larger font. This will be the other 15-second pause read of those on the prior page. These are the 9 factors. Some of them will be very evident to you. Some might be annoying to you, but these are the 9. I'll be quiet while you read this through for 15 seconds. So as you're thinking about that list, you'll see 5 are in red. They get a greater weight. Man, if you've got a target customer and they have money, and you've got, a whole product, and your channel is so excited about selling, or you're going online, you've got a good, and the only problem is, point 2, problem or compelling reason to buy is an uno, 1. You got a problem, which means fantastic. You got a well-configured product for a market that doesn't have a problem. How's that? And we don't just throw numbers at this. There's some dialogue and some scenario building around each of these. But it turns out that the numbers do matter. I'll give you an illustration. This is from a real client. I've anonymized it. This is around a automation logistics business. A low-scoring sample, you'll see down there, the score there, that's not 85 or above. Turns out the same product for a different segment scores pretty well. Is that possible? That your same solution for different segments might score differently? Yes, that's the point. That's why when you average the scores between 2 segments, you're wasting your time. You're getting a fuzzy outcome versus a sharper one. And so in this case, they went with that 80 plus, 85 plus, and basically nailed it. Talk more about that at another point in this session here. Coming back to that list, you see those 9? So Michael, where does size of growth rate come in? It's the 10th variable, not the 9th one, not the 8th one. First, score them, and then come out with the ones that are in the 80s. If your 55 is 4 times larger than all the others, it don't matter. If a 55 score, anything at 80 or above, 85 or above is the real threshold. Then start sizing it to say, of those, which ones are the more robust, bigger ones to go after. So there's a methodology here. You'll see in the book more details on that. And what it turns out is size and growth rate is the last variable, not the first one. And by the way, your VCs and funders will respect you for saying, first we looked at the problems. I heard a phrase from up here from a couple people, we see hockey sticks all day, right? Most people don't even play hockey. It's a niche sport in most places, right? But man, hockey sticks all over the pitch decks, right? And it turns out that the last one is size and growth rate, not the first one or the second or the third one. And so we built a toolkit around those 9 variables. It doesn't give you a 10-year vision. The toolkit's around 12 to 24 months, sometimes 36 months. But I want to give you an example of, I mentioned Salesforce a few times. They used to be a $30 million business too, or a 20 million, or a 50 million, or a 60. I just checked because I have to keep updating the number in the upper left-hand corner. It was 26 billion like a few months ago. Now it's 28.5. They're going to exit 23 at about 31 billion. They got problems, but not market problems. They got to figure out what to do with that building and all the extra space, the people working at home. Those are all other issues we don't help with at Chasm, but the market is responding well to what they're doing. And when they came to market, their initial foray was not as successful as Mark Benioff wanted to. They went after the Fortune 500. By the way, that's not a segment. Fortune 500 has manufacturing, retail, healthcare, et cetera. And they closed a few deals, but not enough. And then they backed off and said, how do we really cross? And they nailed it in one segment where they called on 600 customer prospects, and they closed 380 of them in the first 12 months. Huge, knocking it out of the, what was it? They went after mid-sized tech companies who are already comfortable with the cloud. This is at a time when people were not comfortable with the cloud yet, and actually picked the east and west coast of the US. Here we go again, it's not nationwide. It was from Seattle, Portland, SF, down to LA and San Diego, and then, you guessed it, Boston, New York, et cetera, down the East Coast. And why that was is they've said if we could put our messaging, our story, our Salesforce, everything, no pun intended, their sales teams into that, and that exploded, and now they sell to Fortune 500. That was not the starting point. So where you finish, it ain't where you start. And so in these last couple of minutes, I wanted to talk about kind of the operationalizing of this. But what you want to build is virality in the bowling alley. I'm not expecting you to see all the words on this page, but the idea is if you hit a head pin that has true catalytic power to it to convert others, we've seen that with those 225 companies we work with. And I'm not going to take you through an example in detail, but let me just click through it and cheat a little bit, because 45 minutes doesn't give us enough time to do all that. And you all know Nest. Nest had a good early market. They actually couldn't decide what Nest was bought by Google. Let's see, where is it there? For about $3 billion a bunch of years ago. And they had a decision to make, which is, how do we cross? They had thousands of early adopters. Some of you were those early adopters where you self-installed the product. Remember that? Pretty cool. Most people don't want to self-install their Nest device. Didn't know that. The parking lot at Nest, mostly Teslas and other cars, early adopters. Who wouldn't want to spend a Saturday installing their own Nest device? About 85% of the market. So Nest had to figure out how do we provide services and integration around that to have that happen. Problem was, the people selling the traditional HVAC stuff, he or she would come in with a big tool belt on, and they thought Nest was a toy. They didn't see that as a real product. Man, show me something from Westinghouse. Show me something from a real company. Who's this Nest guy from Apple iPods? So the issue is they had to build a whole product. And they had a decision to make, which was which segment to go after first. And I'm just going to click through because we don't have time to go through the details. But they had choice points around at least 3 different product areas matching with the marketplace in the US. And it turns out the hard one was not always the best one. And if you do a little bit of searching online, you'll figure out what they actually went after. But there was security, there was carbon monoxide detection, there was the ring, the doorbell in front, all those things, by the way. And what we're going to see is that what Nest did eventually is pick 2 really ripe segments to go after first. Now, the last question is, we can pick the right segment, but how do we make sure we operationalize? And that's the last 2 minutes of this, but again, you'll get the slides if you'd like them. We call it a 9-point segment strategy. You don't need to write a 300-page document. In fact, any 300-page document I see, it usually tells me that you don't understand the customer. You go to chapter 4, please see appendices. You can have appendices on this, but have 1 page that talks about who you're aiming at, what the time frame is, what the objective is, what their problem is, that's compelling pain point, all those kind of things. And then taking that and actually asking yourselves this question as you put it together. Put in red all the things that you don't know to be true right now or unknown, and put in black font everything you know to be true. And so let me just jump to the example that I've got here. Here we are. That's the density of the slide. Now, that's not a whole strategic plan, but that's the density that says if you can take that one and then click perhaps, the ideal slide set is 11 slides. 11 slides, how'd you get to that? 1 for each of the 9, so when you click, it gives you another more detail. 1 for the objective, and then the front cover page. Have 100 pages of appendices, but don't make anybody read all those pages. And what this should be is crisp and clear, and actually answer, and again, I can send this to you, but I'm not going to go through it now. If we don't answer these 9 questions, then we have a hope, we have a fantasy, we have a dream, but we ain't got a strategy. And so like everything, you need buy-in. If just the founder has the 9 points in their head, that's great, but that's not enough. Can you get your cross-functional teams, your R&D, your go-to-market people, your investors, your funders, all lined up on this 9-point plan? After which 1 or 2 segments you're going after. And like anything, life is a project. Build it out as a project. Put timelines in place. Put your discipline from your military background in place, and build out the 9-point plan in a way that, at the end of it, you test it. Not with your own, you test it with customers, you test it with investors. And this is not a pitch deck. This is your strategy deck. Your pitch deck might come out of that. And so what I've covered here are what I hope are, 3 really important questions. If you did not get your book, there's books out there for you. I wrote 50 pages in this newest version of the book, so whatever your favorite 50 pages are not the ones that I wrote. Geoffrey, our chairman, is the better writer. I put in the examples from the cases we worked on. But in all seriousness, it's an easy read. If you're on an airplane, you'll have an advantage because you can read on the flight home. Don't do it driving down 280. I don't recommend that. But there's a book out there for each one of you. It's the third version with the newest examples in there. And what I should mention is if we can get those 3 questions right, you, your team, whether it's 3 people or 30 people, one more thing to mention. I want to thank you. Thanks for your attention. If you have any questions, come on up. Happy to answer those. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you.